Southern Utah legislators, better known as the Sunshine Caucus, joined students at Utah Tech University to share accomplishments during the 2023 legislative session. Lawmakers spent 45 days passing over 500 bills at the tune of around $29 billion to aid in the success of the state.
But basically, what happened 2 years ago when we had COVID, we thought things were going to turn down quick, so we pulled back budgets and didn't spend it. So we had all this extra money, and that's the surplus. It was really good management more than surplus.
We were able to make some very large investments. You mentioned the $29 billion that we were able to spend on some very large projects and get out from under some bonds. And so that will actually save the taxpayers of Utah money over their lifetime.
The economy only grew about less than 2%, but we had money left over from prior years because of sound fiscal responsibility. The tax cut, we cut Social Security, we cut income tax. All in all, it was about $800 million if all of the proposed things go through.
The Republican members touted their efforts to save money with tax credits and supporting passage of the sales tax on food, which still needs to be voted on in November 2024.
So when we see that we're having this trend and we're collecting more money than we feel like we need to run government, we need to give it back. And that's what the income tax, Social Security tax, and potentially the food tax will do.
Several bills are directly related to projects right here in the St. George area.
We've got money to expand the Cox Auditorium to make a home for the Heritage Choir, the Southwest Symphony. That was a huge deal. We got some money to expand the St. George Airport. As you know, the FAA is going to match that. They said if we'd come up with that, they're going to put a tower here. Planes presently are dispatched out of LA Center, which doesn't make any sense. So we got some money for land banking. Where the St. George Fire Station is on 10th East and 1st South, we were able to get that funded. We got some innovation money, ongoing money to stimulate that.
As you talked about the airport center, one thing we were able to land here, no pun intended, is the new DPS helicopter for search and rescue in the Mighty 5 area, but now there are 3 helicopters throughout the state for DPS.
So in the Hurricane Fire District, we have a fire department and emergency medical ambulance. And because my district includes Zion National Park, we get millions and millions of people that show up, and we're having to supply all the emergency medical services for them. So I ran a bill that basically added Washington County into an existing law. There was an existing law that allows counties of the 3rd through the 6th class that can have a sales tax that can be used for emergency medical. So what we're going to be doing over there, we got that passed, so it allows for any municipality within Washington County, if they want to, they can go from a property tax if they want and go to a sales tax.
Many of the bills passed this legislative session had to do with water resources, education, and housing, with water being amongst a top priority.
So one thing that we have made national news on is how many golf courses we have here in St. George or in Washington County. We have like 13 or so. And we're always talking about water crises. So how do we balance that out? And then they don't even have to report, or there's not really accountability there. So there was a bill that was presented that never made it to the Senate floor about this. So I just was wanting to know, is there plans to have this bill try to get pushed forward? Are we going to bring this back? And kind of what your guys' thoughts on that is.
You think about golf courses and who owns them. Every single place is different. Like in St. George, we use poop water. We use recycled sewage. So is that going to be measured different than someone that's using culinary water or from a stream? Or is it DNR that's using some reservoir that they're using? So we needed to make sure it's being allocated and addressed correctly. So we had him make some changes and come back, and it still didn't pass committee. We wanted to make sure that if we're going to address something as important as water, it needs to make sure that it gets all perspectives and vetted very carefully. So instead of just saying, hey, go to the summer we wanted it to be heard so that not only could the committee hear it, but people could react and respond. So the one thing great about the legislature, it's open meetings. Everything's recorded. Every individual can comment. With COVID, it made it even easier from people down here because now they can just go in through Zoom and be able to participate. So we heard that bill twice to make sure that what he wanted to accomplish was being accomplished, and now it's going to go through the next step, which is what we call the interim, and this Legislative Water Commission, and it'll most likely come again next year.
Students in the audience also asked questions about other bills they were concerned about.
There was Senate Bill 16, I believe it was, that was passed, and then a related bill, HB 132, and the name of it was Prohibiting Sex Transitioning Procedures on Minors. And this also was co-sponsored by Representative Brooks, Ellison, and Jack. So as there's collaboration in the Sunshine Caucus on this, I would love for you guys to talk a little bit more about who you were trying to protect in this and why you felt like this was representative of your position in this district.
Gender transition is, for all practical purposes, it's irreversible. And is this a decision that we're going to allow people to make an irreversible decision as a minor when the context around consent, we don't, in a legal context, even really allow that? Because if I enter into a contract with you and you are a minor, that contract is voidable by you. I can't enforce that contract. But now we're entering into a form of agreement or contract or a set of actions that are entirely irreversible. And is that the right decision to allow minors to make?
And when you start talking about gender dysphoria, there's no beating around the bush. It is a psychological disorder. And there are ways to help individuals go through the process of, there's counseling, there's psychiatric help, there's psychological help. There's a lot of resources out there to help people, because to ignore and to say that this isn't a real issue, it is a real issue. And there are a lot of people who go into this gender dysphoria space, and after all that they go through in terms of psychological help, psychiatric help, and so forth, still choose to have a gender reassignment. That's their decision, right? Some people go through that process, and in the end, they end up finding out, you know what, I don't want to go through that process, and they choose to take alternate methods of treatment. And then later on find out, you know what, that was a good decision, because now I didn't do something that was life-altering that I can never, ever change and get back.
And more than anything else, the most effective treatment for that suicidality is transition. And there will be children who will be more at risk for suicide and for self-harm if there is a down-and-out ban. And that's just the reality. And with respect to the desire to do more research, I would ask, will there be, what priority will be placed on doing that research, and what priority will be placed on not on this moratorium being used as what it's meant to be used for, and not as a soft ban, not as an excuse for a ban?
Look, can we just tap the brakes for a minute? Because other nations who have gone all in on this are saying we're having even worse problems. So this is a tap the brakes. And the message, I hear this a lot, this is a message of attack by the state legislature, attack on the trans community or LGBTQ. And that message, I'm just telling you, is not anything I've ever felt or heard. It might be a narration from someone saying that, but it can also be looked at just the opposite, as this is an act of love.
We appreciate the work that you're doing up there on behalf of this locality, and why don't we give them a round of applause.
From Utah Tech University, Melissa Anderson, Community Education News.